Next. Nope. I don't want it for me. Why? Can I push that?
We'll give folks just a second to get to come in to the session.
See the next slide.
There we go. All right, so thank you so much for coming back, everyone. Hope you're enjoying our day today. Our next presenters are Guy and Matt Choiniere, who are going to be talking about their farm, which has been dairy plus other things as well. Guy and Matt are located in Vermont. Their bio and information is in the session description below their speaker information. So I highly encourage you to learn more about them. But we're going to let them dive right in and start to tell us a little bit more about their farm. And please feel free, folks, if you're joining through Zoom, to private message me for any questions that you have for these guys when we're done. And if you're in Whova, just use the Q&A to post your questions in there, and then you can vote on the questions. So thanks, everybody, and I'll turn it over to Guy and Matt.
Thank you, Jen. How's everyone today? Jen, I hope you know you guys are always rock stars in the grazing world. So thank you for all you do for us. Today I'm here with my co-host Matt, and today we'll be talking about the history of the farm, lessons we learned from previous generations, multiple transitions we've gone through to satisfy premium markets, and our future, where we want to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm going to let Matt start off by introducing himself, and then I'll continue from that point.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us and listening to our farm story. My name is Matt. I've been back on the home farm since 2015. I was active on the farm all through high school, but then I graduated in 2013 and decided to go spend a few years in college. I went to Vermont Tech and did the dairy herd management program. So I got a lot of experience there, and I made a lot of really good connections. And I came home on the farm with a little new perspective and I think some new skills that I was able to, that have helped me get to this point and help us kind of get to this point. And in the meantime, I've had a lot of mentors, my dad being the biggest, but I've also had a lot of strong influences in the grazing world from the VGFA and Organic Valley and all the other organizations and workshops I've been able to attend. So what we'll talk about today is kind of a mix of both of our experiences that we've had on our own, but what we've learned from others as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. I love having Matt here. We just feed off each other so well that it works well listening to having both of us here. But I hope everybody had a great winter. Ours was pretty good. We didn't break any records with milk production, but in the cows' defense, it was very cold up here in Highgate Center. And the wind just blew and just cut right through us. So there were many days that Matt and I were cold, but I know the cows might have been a little bit cold too. But it's springtime and we all survived. We're doing great. Last summer, we also had a very dry, probably the driest summer I ever remember. And we had some stressed out feed. So considering the weather and the feed quality, I think the cows are doing awesome. So we have a lot of slides today, but I know that's what I like when I see a presentation. I love pictures, and we're going to just keep them moving and just try to tell you our story.
That's 3 slides.
Well,
This is also our first time doing a joint Zoom presentation together, so we're gonna figure it out as we go.
this picture here is really hard for us to look at because we have a hard time believing this is what we looked like in the 80s, but it's a show right off so you can see how much work we've put into improving the farm and water quality and ecosystems. But this is our farm back when my dad and I were farming. And this was normal. This was perfectly normal for us. We had no clue that this wasn't the way it should be. But over time, we got educated with a lot of assistance and a lot of attention. We can show you a lot of the improvements we've made on the farm. So this is our farm today, pretty much looking at the same view, and it shows a lot of things that's gone on. So you can see the original tie style barn, which is next on the left side of those silos. Our old barn burned in 1974. So we built this economy barn when back in the 70s, that was pretty normal, not a lot of engineering, but we housed the animals in there, and we've milked cows in a pipeline system for over 40 years in that barn. Just last year, we were able to give that barn a facelift with a brand new parlor, and we loaded up the roof with solar panels. So we have 180 solar panels on that roof. So it really brought that building to life. So we're really happy about that. And you can see the hoop barns. In this picture, we had 2, we now have 4. But as times change and as we try to improve animal health and relieve some stress, we just kept putting them up, and they are technically covered barnyards. And as you can see, we're very close to the river, but the only way to fix the river banks is take the cows off. So now we have dedicated river crossings, and in the winter times, they live in these hoop barns. You can see cattle lanes, a lot of infrastructure we're going to talk about today, fencing, water lines. You can see the hills all lead down to the Rock River, which is an impaired waterway. So it's ranked us very well in a lot of USDA programs. You see a lot of trees now. We've planted over 5,000 trees on our entire farm. So now it's really starting to come to fruition, and we really love what we're seeing. We love the wildlife that's now joining us, and the cows are a lot happier than they used to be. So our farm is located in the Highgate Center, which is about 4 miles from the Canadian border. We milk roughly about 80 mature cows, Holsteins. We raise all our own replacements. We've had a closed herd for over 40 years. We do carry laying hens, pigs, and we raise veal. We do have a farm store, so that's why we added a few more animals. We have 120 acres of pasture, and 40 of which are rented. And through multiple farm purchases, we now have 350 acres of hayland that we use for feed and bedding. We supply all our own bedding. And we use the farm store where we sell eggs and honey and meat and whatever we feel people we're willing to do and people are asking for. There's a lot of foot traffic through that store. And we haven't sold an animal through the conventional market or on the meat truck for almost 4 years. So everything runs through that store. So it's really held a premium for us on our cull animals, which has been really nice. We've been certified organic with Organic Valley since 2005, which has been a blessing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And grass milk, we'll talk about our transition to grass milk, because that has been a great adventure as well since 2014.
So on the farm, it's been a team effort from day one, and all of us have contributed in our own way. We are the 4th generation. Well, I'm the 4th generation right now. We don't have them listed, but my great grandparents moved over from Canada in the earlier 1900s, and they kind of settled a farm a few miles away. The oldest son took that farm over, and my grandfather was about 14. They moved to this farm. Shortly after he took over, and he worked here up until he passed away in 2017. My grandmother Raymond, she still comes to the barn every day. She's kind of our caretaker. She makes sure we're well fed, at least for breakfast. We go over there every morning, but she comes and helps tie the cows and sweep up any feed. She does the chickens. My dad is obviously the main man on the farm, doing most of the day-to-day decision making and operations. My mom also helps out. She has an off-farm job, but when oftentimes when we're in a pinch or if I have to go somewhere, she's always quick to step up. I've been full-time on the farm since 2015. And my partner Julia has also been part of the farm for the past few years. She also works off the farm, but she's always, again, quick to help us out on projects and anything on the side. Then we also rely heavily on neighbors, relatives, and friends, especially during hay season. We have a lot of acres to cover, and we're just really a two-man operation. So we definitely need we have a lot of people that we rely on and who are always quick to step up to help us.
So like Matt said, we're 4 generations. And what's really cool about the 4 is that they've all been successful. They've all been very open-minded, and we make note of that. Matt and I make note of that. What did they do well? And we try to bring those pieces. And I think that's something I'd like to pass on today, that definitely don't ignore what the previous generations have done, because they've done a lot of good things, and I'm sure they made mistakes just like we're making mistakes now, but there's huge amounts of experience there that we've learned from. So I just want to share a little bit about that. So this is a really fun picture. It's just my grandfather, Matt's great grandfather, and he was just very innovative. He wasn't afraid to make changes or try new things. So he was just sick of the slow pace of the horses spreading manure out into the field. So he modified this doodle bug, which is a cross between a car and a truck, and hooked it up, and he was able to get, and it worked great for him because it was able to get into the farther fields, and he was able to get back home quicker. So I always think this is a really fun picture to look at. So what my grandfather did well is that cows lived for a very long time. And no, they did July 4th hay, and he had 13 kids, had plenty of labor. But the takeaway here is that his cows lived a very long time, and a lot of fiber in the diet, a lot of fresh air, and his cows were always outdoors. My dad, in his generation, he was during the corn era, and he started improving feed quality. He started feeding the cows corn, alfalfa hay. He started working with genetics, and he made a lot of milk, was very successful as a farmer. But he did pull the cows into the barns more. But we're taking what he did well, which was high quality feeds. We planted, and he was very good at crop rotation, and he fed quite a bit of grain, but we did make a lot of milk, and during those years, milk was still very profitable.
And we're still living off of most of his tractors today. We don't really have any tractor newer than this one he's driving here, which is the 1983.
Yeah.
So most of the equipment that we have are still living off of what he purchased, what he was able to purchase with the milk that he made.
Exactly. Good point. So then in 2005, it was my turn to show success. So my wife and I were looking, and we knew we had to support my parents' retirement, and plus make a lot of changes that we wanted to make to the farm. So the only place that we really would look seriously at or getting certified organic because of the price stability, but a lot came after that. So we chose to go with Organic Valley, and we are so happy and proud to be an Organic Valley member. They take good care of their farmers. They care about the animals, and they care about the customers. So we have only good things to say about Organic Valley, and we've been certified organic since 2005.
So kind of like my dad just said, initially the decision to transition to organic was financial, just because the conventional market was such a roller coaster in their prices, and it was hard to figure out how we were going to pay or support my grandparents' retirement. But again, like you said, it quickly became more than just the money, because once we saw that, or once we got good advice from some strong mentors, and they told us that it's not about just replacing one organic or a conventional product with the organic equivalent. it was about looking at the system as a whole and seeing every sickness or every problem as a symptom of a bigger issue. And a lot of that came down to the health of the soil. And once we kind of got that down and started putting a lot of investment and a lot of effort into improving our soil health, that's when our lives really changed. And I think when farming really became fun. So looking back, it was 100% worth it. Just the member benefits that Organic Valley offers, the family atmosphere within the cooperative. Everyone's out there to help each other, and we're not complaining. We're not. It's not like us versus them. Like, we really feel like we're part of a strong team. And they really work hard to give us a stable pay price and support us in ways above and beyond just financial, between nutrition experts on staff who are always willing to help. We have sustainability experts, plenty more. We have, and just incentives to take us to the next level.
So when I first transitioned to organic, was looking to go to organic. I attended a lot of workshops, and lucky enough, we have a lot of resources in this area that we're holding workshops for us. So I tried to always bring one thing home every meeting and apply it to the farm. But eventually I narrowed it down to this pyramid of priorities for our farm. And really, you see the bottom is about the soil health. Every meeting I went to was very consistent that soil health is where it starts. And if you do a good job at that level, the crop health will fall into place, the animals will be healthier, and the people eating off these products will be healthier. So really, that made my job a lot easier because I focused on air, water, organic matter, and minerals in the soil. And all by importance, air being number one, compaction and how you're managing the land with your equipment, making and realizing that the soil is living and breathing. So with that moving forward, it made things a lot easier for me to understand, and I didn't feel so overwhelmed. So I really look at this pyramid constantly, so it reminds me of where my priorities are. And what we're going to say about this one, about organic?
No, how rotational grazing became a big.
Yeah, rotational grazing. When we transitioned to organic, because we used to graze, well, we thought we were grazing, but it's really a static pasture. It's 15 acres of pasture that they went and laid down in after they went through the feed bunk and filled up. But rotational grazing was a lot different. We had to convert the entire farm to different multiple paddocks and get them there every day, move them to the next paddock, give the grass recovery. But what was so important, what made it work so much better was the infrastructure. I remember the first days of me trying to send the cows out and bypass the feed bunk was a nightmare because they were circling around me so fast. So not until I started installing cattle lanes and good high tensile fencing did I have some control of them, and so that they could stay in the pastures long enough to start grazing. And once they did, there's no better feed than grazing an animal directly on grass, because that grass is basically a solar panel harvesting that energy from the sun. And if she can eat it directly, she's going to get so much more nutritional value, because if you're harvesting that feed, a couple of things are happening. You're losing energy through fermentation and you're losing energy through respiration. And so having them eat it directly is always the highest quality feed. So I definitely saw the numbers starting to change when I was able to meet some of my dry matter intakes through pasture. And this is a picture to show you our native grasses work really well. I know we're always trying to improve our grasses, but the biggest thing is set your grasses up for success. So meeting the mineral, making sure your minerals are balanced, soil samples are really important, and making sure you're setting the stage for your legumes, because your legumes are really supporting your grasses out in an organic situation. So these are just native grasses, clovers, bluegrass. You see some orchard grass, ryegrass. So you're seeing a lot of different grass. There's some tall fescue there, which is not their favorite, but during stressed out time, it's actually pretty good. So these native grasses do well. You need to feed the pastures. We did notice that the cows really take a lot away from the pastures. So we do feed them with manure and minerals, and this is what we get. So these are fall pictures right here. This is in the fall.
Dandelions, right?
Not the dandelion, no, not the dandelions and legume, but the one on the left is a September picture. So it's living off from what we fed it during the growing season. The annuals really found a place on our farm, because during the summer, though, those native grasses do take a slump. They're all cool season. Most of them are cool season grasses, and they require more recovery. So we started rotating annuals into the mix, where they could come home about 2 o'clock, which is, you know, mid-afternoon at the hottest temperatures, when they're pretty much sick of grazing that short grass. But they come into these fields with the annuals, and it's like everything changes. It's like they're superstars again. And they start eating, and I think it's not as hot when they get into that shaded grass, but this definitely replaced the grain that we pulled away from them, and they're getting a lot of value. But we don't let them lay down in here. We just give them a couple hours before they come and get milk and fill up and get some of that high energy feed before they come home. So that's worked out really well. And here's just another mix of radishes and turnips, and there's buckwheat. What else?
Took
you
some
see?
forage brassicas in there. I think in this mix had cowpeas.
And I'm sure the sunflowers will come out eventually. But really, we're feeding the soil as much as the cows with these annual mixes. So they really produce a lot of biomass in the ground, which feed the earthworm, which are doing a lot of work for us. And then the cows just enjoy what we're growing on top. So a lot of benefits. We really enjoy that. It's something we'll continue to do. Go ahead.
So another thing that we had to account for when we turned organic, or when we transitioned, was that we needed 365 days of outdoor access for the cows. Like, we couldn't leave them tied up. And being so close to the Rock River, it was pretty obvious that if we left them outside every day, once the ground thawed and the snow melted, most of that manure would have ended up into the river, just as surface runoff. So I worked with the NRCS to get cost share funding to put up a covered barnyard, and the cows end up spending about, depending on the time of year, but mostly in the winter time, 6 hours or 12 hours a day minimum. We have two groups, so one stays in the tie stall to keep it from freezing, but then the other group comes out, and then they alternate every 12 hours. So after every milking, someone else goes out. And this has been huge for reducing animal stress. Now, the bedded pack, it does take a lot of bedding, and it does add some work, but as far as cow comfort is concerned, well-managed bedded pack is huge for cow comfort. They have good footing. They stay warm on the heated pack, especially on the coldest days. Like a cow will stand up after a night of laying down. You can just see the steam rolling out from underneath her. We've never had any frostbite from the cows when they were in the hoop barns. So it's a great way to get outdoor access without while still protecting them. But it's been huge for us being able to watch for heats. When the cows have good footing, they're not afraid of slipping, and they show better heats. And they can, it just gives them space to socialize and graze off of the hay on the ground. And it also helps remove a lot of competition when they can eat off the ground and out of the bale feeder. So even the timid ones can get to eat.
So where we are now, so those are a lot of the changes transitioning to organic itself. And now we're 100% grass fed, which was another premium market. We didn't plan on growing the farm. Matt now coming back to the farm, we now have 2 families. So how do we gain a little more premium on our milk sales? So the grass milk was a great option for us, and Organic Valley offered it. So we, well, actually, I saw a great opportunity for this being a challenge for Matt. So how do we maintain milk production, but take away all the grain that we've been feeding and any of the corn that we've been feeding? So and I always think that's a good idea for the next generation to own a challenge. And so I thought perfect timing. So Matt really helped us figure this one out. Increasing dry matter, the first thing we realized, because grain was about 30% of their dry matter intake. So how do we replace that? So we relied at first we relied more on the annuals because of the amount of biomass and volume that it provides. And it's actually good quality feed if you graze at the right time. But like you can see, we only graze enough that they can eat in a couple hours, and we get them out of there. We started adopting hay in a day. How do we get more energy out of the same feed? So this, believe it or not, no, everyone's talked about it, everyone does it, and it is true. Hay in a day does make more milk. It maintains the energy in the feeds. Again, it's not respirating. You slow down the respiration, you gain more energy in the feeds. So this is with a simple thing. We took our shields off our mower, and boom, there it is, white swath. Reduced animal stress. Well, we were at about 100 square feet per animal in these hoop barns, which we felt wasn't enough. Once we went to grass, we had to remove all competition because there's all kinds of personalities in our herd, and the timid ones didn't want to fight in the not fight, but challenge the stronger ones in those bale feeders. And so we built 2 more barns, and we now have a total of 4 bedded pack barns. Because of the land purchases that we made, we needed more manure anyway to cover the acres. So it only made sense for us to produce more manure, and the animals were willing to do it for us. And we now produce about 1,200 ton of bedded pack manure, and it maintains a temperature of about 90 degrees throughout the winter. So it's not fully composted, but it's ready to spread when we pull it out of the barn. So again, just a picture. There's a lot of things happening in these barns. They're eating, they're socializing, but they also need to lay down, and they need to find a clean place to lay down. So that's why we need the square footage, just to make sure they could find a clean place, because hygiene is big, trying to keep these cows clean. But one thing we noticed this year, that we had a harder time with the hygiene because they didn't want to stand up. They was so cold that they would stay laying down. They'd poop right in place, and it was hard to keep them clean when they do that. So this is extreme, but this is what happens if you don't give them enough bunk space. And they compete, they push, and the timid ones get pushed out. So that this was one of the first early pictures of our hoop barns, but the same thing happens in the pastures. You need to provide plenty of space for them to eat. But this is what we have to work on. So a lot of the changes we're showing you was to remove this competition from the herd. One thing we learned that is very important to let the herd out all to once, because the first ones get there and they sort of dominate and they eat the best and leave the rest. So we would try to make sure that the herd, when we send them out to pasture, they all get milked and they all leave together, because it's a long walk, and they're not only following each other, but they're training some of the young ones. And the cattle lanes have made a huge difference in us not having to follow them, because once they get on that lane, there's nowhere to go until they reach the open gate. So they're walking up to a mile through these obstacles, up the hills, and they're very good at not stopping until they reach the paddock. So the infrastructure was key for us because we have so many obstacles in place. And by doing all this, you know, every time you relieve stress and offer more nutrition, you're boosting the immune system. And that's our goal here in life, is to boost the immune system for the cows, but we also using them as an example on how we should be living. And it's really worked. We used to have $6,000 vet bills. We now basically only have vets for preg checks and dehorning. So it's we have a mineral buffet here. So for any minerals they're not getting or need more of, they have access here with kelp, Redmond salt, a fortified mineral that is high in calcium and phosphorus, and AD&E, immune boosters. So they know exactly what they need. So all we need to do is put it out there, and they select on their own which ones they need.
I'll do the last one.
This is just a quick snap. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but I do want to show you that this whole process started in 2003. We were in survival mode when we were looking at transition to organic. And just some of the numbers here, our plan wasn't to increase animal numbers. As you can see, we're at 65 cows. But if you follow the charts down, you can see how we started increasing pasture acres and reducing the amount of corn acres and the amount of corn pounds. But by, again, removing stress in their life, it doesn't require as much energy from their feed, because it's sort of it offsets. So you can see here in 2003, when we were at 1 pound of grain was producing us about 4 pounds of milk. Well, through a lot of these changes, but 4 years later, we are now 1 pound of grain would produce 8 pounds of milk without really sacrificing. As you can see, total milk pounds produced, we are able to maintain production on the farm, and the components were actually improving a little bit. So it's not only what you're feeding, but it's the amount of stress the animal is under is making a big difference. And it continued on. So we don't stop there. In 2012, again, 5 years after that last chart, we're still gaining, but we had the same number of cows, down to 60 ton of grain a year with 0 acres of corn. So we now removed all corn acres and replaced that with extra pasture and grass. So we're now at 1 pound of grain is now producing us 9 pounds of milk. And now today, no pounds of grain at all, absolutely no corn. We've increased our acres, our pasture acres, but we did purchase more land. So that, again, at least we have more control of that. There's still a mortgage payment in there. So it's not free. That milk definitely isn't free, but we feel like we have much more control and it was more sustainable by having that extra acres under our belt. And because we grow our own bedding, it's nice to have. And you can see that we're still shipping 850,000 pounds. This year, we actually hit 950,000 pounds. So again, with no grain, no corn. So it's a process. And as we learn, I'm really excited at the potential of these cows. We're really proud of them.
So some of the challenges that we've noticed as being grass-fed and just organic farmers in general, feed inventory is always critical. Making sure we have enough feed, especially with the droughts. Feed inventory has been less predictable, as well as the quality. When we stopped importing grain, we kind of stopped importing phosphorus on the farm. So we saw our phosphorus levels in our soil drop pretty fast. So that's one thing that we have to bring in, as well as potassium, but it doesn't seem like we need as much potassium. Maintaining conditioning without any added extra energy has always been a challenge, but that's where high quality forages come in, and the cows have been doing well. Maximizing dry matter intake is key to our success. So making sure all of our feed is palatable, and grazing, and making sure all the pastures they're going into have enough feed for them. Supporting 2 families on 75 cows, we have to be really efficient with our purchases. and making sure we're not being too loose with our management. And climate change and drought are probably the two of the things that are going to be our biggest challenges going forward. And we're going to be a little bit quicker. We only have like 10 minutes left
Okay.
already.
I was gonna say another challenge is water retention. You know, we're really afraid that that's gonna be our biggest shortage, our biggest ingredient we need to maintain. So we're really trying to figure out how to, when it does rain, how do you keep more of it on your farm? Because we live on the hills, it tends to run off. And so we're doing a lot with key lining and just building a bigger sponge out there with our bedded pack manure to try to hold more water.
Lessons that we've learned through all of our experience and trials and errors is that prioritizing soil health is one of the best investments of your time and money. But also you only have so much bandwidth. That's one thing we've kind of learned, is that when we've spread ourselves out too thin in the past and we weren't able to do a good job with the things that we were doing, like got behind on forage quality in our hay, and weren't able to get manure out when we were supposed to. So learning to manage your time and knowing when to say no will help you kind of do a better job with the things that you have. And we've kind of had the motto of keeping everything simple. The more complicated things are, the less likely you are to get them done and get them done right. And managing the advice you receive. We all receive advice every day, but we need to figure out like what's worth following and what stuff to be taken with a grain of salt. If it we'll just skip through these quick because we have more important slides. That
Yeah, here's a picture of that parlor that we put up. It's a 20 cow parlor. It retrofitted right into the barn, and it works really well. We're really happy with it. It allows one man to do all the milking now instead of two, and that's how we gained efficiency with our labor. Another way we gained efficiency was to buy a stronger baler that could hold more feed per bale. So when we did, unfortunately, we feed the cows 6 to 8 months out of the year because of where we live. And so we do harvest quite a bit of feed, but now the bales that are coming home are holding more hay. And so there's less transport. And when we do put them in the feeder, the cows don't run out as quick. So buying the bigger, stronger baler did help. And to feed that baler, because Matt and I do our own work out in the fields and we still milk the cows on each end of the day, we have to get more acres done per day. So investing in this merger, it's the 25-foot merger, allowed him to rake up to 100 acres a day, and which is a huge help, because that window of quality means so much more to us now that we rely on hay to make our milk.
So just, I thought a vision statement would be, this is what kind of guides us in our decisions. So our goal is to profitably produce food of exceptional quality, nutrient density, and flavor using methods that build soil health and biodiversity, but also allow the animals to express their highest natural potential, but also give us the time and energy to care for our health and our relationships. Those are all very important things to us. So going forward in the future, those are going to be guiding a lot of our decisions. So one of the first priorities to help us kind of protect ourselves from climate change and build soil health and animal health, we've started to do a practice called rip sowing. So we're subsoiling on contour, but also adding in some diverse plants into the rips to help to build some roots into that subsoil to break it up, but also adding biostimulants and biofertilizers to help stimulate root growth and improve the microbes in the soil. And the picture of the radish in my hand on the far right, that's only a 10-day-old radish that was inoculated with some of our brews, and that's an 8-inch root. So that was pretty impressive. And we give a lot of credit to the some stuff we've been learning about fermenting, biostimulants, and no-turn compost inoculants. So just yesterday, we had a workshop where we're learning as a community on how to make these inoculants and biofertilizers. So here we're just making one of them. You can see we had a huge group of over 30 people helping out, and everyone's planning on going home and doing something at least that can apply it to their own farm or at their own home. And we really think that this community style of learning and working together and sharing our experience is key to a successful future in agriculture. Diversification we've touched on, but the milk market, any market, is never guaranteed, and you always want to kind of hedge against any price dips. And also, the more diverse any system is, the more I guess the more sustainable it is. A lot of byproducts turn into the feedstock of another. So the bee, in one case, we started beekeeping for some honey. The diverse flowering plants in our meadows and riparian buffers were important for the bees, and the bees are important to help to pollinate all those plants. So those work together, and the farm store is another thing that, you know, we have cull cows. We want to raise chickens to help scratch up our pastures and eat bugs and add some nitrogen to the fields. Pigs will help consume waste milk and food scraps, and all those things kind of work in a whole system where on their own they might not be as efficient, but working in as an ecosystem, they can definitely benefit us more than just on their own. And do you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, one piece of that ecosystem we felt we were missing was with community. So as you can see, we started involving community on the farm with these workshops, but also we created some trails because we had some beautiful trails on just naturally on the farm. We started using them ourselves. We started inviting the neighbors, but then there was so much interest. The schools wanted to start using them for their sports. So we are now hosting at least 5 or 6 events a year on these trails, or bird watchers, just a lot of different things on the farm, and they're happy to come, and we're happy to have them here because with the farm store, it creates foot traffic, and which is good for us. So we're really happy to involve the community now in our little ecosystem here.
And we definitely feel like the health and the success of the community has a huge impact on the health and success of our farm. So the more we can involve the community and get them out on the farm, get them outside, and keep them healthy, the more that they're going to be able to help us in our future. And renewable energy, like my dad had started off with before, we did have access to a program through Organic Valley where we were able to cover the entire roof of our barn and solar panels. So now the space that wasn't really working too much for us is now supplying most of the energy needs of the farm, and doing so without any emissions. So we felt that was an important piece to add, and there's no saying that we'll stop there. There's plenty of renewable sources of energy, and it's just about getting creative on how to capture them.
Now, farmers have been harvesting the sunlight for a long time, and now we can harvest sunlight on our rooftops. So I think that's pretty cool. And just real quick, but very important. Like I mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of resources helping us through the years, and Organic Valley has been very important to us through research and publication and things, and reading materials they're constantly sending us. UVM Extension, we've been blessed with a really talented team of technicians that are willing to come out to the farm, do some projects or experiments. Anything we ask them to do, they're almost willing to do. NRCS, a lot of cost share, a lot of workshops. NOFA has been super helpful for us. So there's an endless amount. Land trust, I believe a lot of our land is land trusted, and that's been great for us. Farm mentor has been super important. So again, listen to some of that experience that's around you from those previous generations.
And with that, we thank you for your time, and we'll take any questions. We know we're like right on the dot of our allotted time, but
That's okay. Thank you so much, you guys. I have been getting some questions in. I'll ask you just a couple, and I encourage folks to continue to ask questions in the they can message you directly too if they have questions. But so a quick one is did you transition the cows that you have when you went through your organic transition in the early 2000s? Did you buy in new cows, or did you transition that herd?
No, we kept all our existing animals, and transit took 3 years to transition. We took the time to transition the land, and then took the full year to transition our own animals. So we've had this closed herd for over 40 years. So we're really proud to have maintained the genetics that my dad worked so hard to get.
Thank you. And I had a grazing annuals question. So when you're seeding in, so the way that you graze annuals for your summer slump and in other uses too, do you repeatedly plant in the same area, or do you pick a different area of the perennial pasture to seed down into those annuals each year?
It's always nice to rotate. Yes, we've gone 2 years in the same spot, especially if it's a real convenient spot, like on the way home. But after that, they're huge nitrogen consumers, so they will absorb the sod that you probably turned in. But after 2 years, we move on to another spot.
Gotcha. Thank you.
and it's a good tool for
yeah.
us. Like we usually have a sacrifice pasture like early in the spring that might get beat up a little more than others. So usually we pick the sacrifice pasture that we pick that might get a little trampled up is where we try to seed our annuals in.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah,
It's a good way to renovate a pasture.
make it work for you.
Totally. So another question is about spreading the compost from your compost barns. You have so much more acreage now than you have in, than you started with. Do you feel like you have enough to spread over all of the acreage? And if you don't, what's your strategy for how to maximize where you're spreading each year?
Well, I'll start. A very good question. So no, we don't have enough to spread on the entire farm. So we have liquid manure from the old conventional pit. That works great as like a chocolate bar. After second cut, we spread it on the grass, and it provides a nice little slug of nitrogen. But the meat and potatoes are really coming from the hard manure. And another reason for putting up more barns was to gain more volume on our bedded pack manure. Our goal is to spread 2 tons to the acre on every acre we have. And by adding more barns, it allowed us to produce more volume. No, the cows are willing to poop on it. All you need to do is put the bedding out there. And the more they eat, the more they're going to supply for you, mineralize. So those extra barns are actually manure factories at the same time. But yes, this year is going to be a learning year, because we used to buy manure from a neighbor, his more hard manure and some liquid. But he said he will not have any to spare this year because of fertilizer prices being so high. So that's why Matt is working so hard with the bioferment to try to take the manure that we already produce and just inoculate it and make it better. Just make it a better soil builder, and so we can get more value out of what we have already.
Well, thank you. We were just talking this morning about the increase in fertilizer prices and what that's going to do with folks holding back their manure. So this feels very topical right now. And I just have one last question. Do you mind sharing how much did the covered barnyards structures cost?
No, at the time, again, my first one, I had 19,000 in the foundation. That one was engineered by NRCS, way overbuilt, but 19,000 in the foundation and 56,000 of truss and canvas. Today, my last barn cost me 70,000, but we did a wood base on that one. We did the 8x8s, so it was built a little different. That was 70,000, but we're hearing prices that have increased significantly since then. So it used to be a cheaper version of construction, but they're seeing how popular they are. So I think the companies, the manufacturers have really upped their price. But those are prices, our last barn was built, what, 10 years ago, roughly? So the prices have changed significantly.
And just to, I mean, talking to someone recently, they had a lot more cement in their plans. But they wanted to do a 140 by 72 with a cement feed alley and a little like an outdoor feed bunk, as well as a covered barnyard, a smaller covered barnyard. So it's an extensive project, but they were quoted something like 650,000 for the project, which would have enough space for about 100 animals. So he was looking at an overhead of about $6,500 per head of infrastructure costs just in the barn.
But USDA is cost sharing very generously. Right now is the time to look. They're cost sharing up to 90% of most projects. It's about ranking for these projects. So I would definitely contact, if you're able to contact some of these people and have them come to the farm and just find out. But the cost share is very good right now.
Well, thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for sharing your awesome story and your awesome pictures also. And I think we're going to close this down and we'll start our next session starts at 2:15. Hope you can join us. And I love that you talked about the triangle because Stefan von Vliet's session at the end of the day is going to talk about that triangle too.
Oh,
so
awesome.
Thank you for continuing the talk through. So thanks everyone. And we'll see you at 2:15.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.